The cold wasn't just in the air. It was a permanent resident in the Park family home, seeping through the heated marble floors and clinging to the silk curtains. For Amina, it had been a constant companion for the 2 years since her divorce from their son, a divorce on paper only. They had kept her, a ghost in their opulent house, a convenient scapegoat for every misfortune, a silent servant they refused to release. Mrs. Park, a woman whose smile was as sharp and thin as a shard of glass, stood before her now, her eyes sweeping over Amina's worn red wool shirt with disdain. It was the last piece of clothing Amina owned from her life before this one, a faded ember of warmth in a world of ice. "You are a stain on this family's reputation," Mrs. Park said, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "A constant, ugly reminder of a mistake my son made. We have tolerated you. We have fed you. That tolerance is now at an end." Amina said nothing. She had learned long ago that her voice was an unwelcome sound in these halls. She simply stood, her hands clenched at her sides, feeling the familiar, hollow ache of hunger in her stomach. Mr. Park, silent and imposing, merely nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed on a stock market ticker flickering across a massive television screen. Their son, the man she had once loved, wasn't even here. He was on a business trip, blissfully unaware or willfully ignorant of the cruelty his parents dispensed in his absence. "Get out," Mrs. Park commanded, gesturing to the grand oak door. "Take your worthless things and get out of my house. Do not come back. Do not contact us. You are nothing to us now. You were always nothing." The finality of the words was a physical blow. Amina didn't beg. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She turned, walked to the small room she occupied in the staff quarters, and packed her few belongings into a thin tote bag. The red wool shirt felt flimsy against the sudden, brutal reality of her eviction. As she walked to the door, the butler held it open, his face a mask of professional indifference. The icy wind of the burgeoning blizzard outside slapped her face, a cruel welcome from the world she was being thrown into. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound of a vault ceiling. She was alone, cast out into the swirling snow with less than $20 in her pocket and a heart frozen solid with betrayal. The world tried to break her, and for a moment, standing on that perfectly manicured but mercilessly cold doorstep, it felt like it had finally succeeded. The blizzard was a white monster, roaring and clawing at the city. Amina pulled the thin collar of her shirt tighter, the wool now soaked and useless against the biting wind. Each snowflake felt like a needle against her exposed skin. The pristine, wealthy neighborhood was deserted, its grand houses sealed tight against the storm, their windows glowing with a warm, taunting light. A light she would never know again. She walked for what felt like hours, her destination a vague, hopeless point somewhere beyond the horizon of snow. Her feet grew numb first, then her hands. The city lights blurred into a watercolor smear of indifferent colors. The cold was no longer just on her skin. It was in her bones, in her blood, a creeping lethargy that promised a final, dreamless sleep. She stumbled, her legs refusing to obey, and fell into a snowdrift by the side of the road. The snow was surprisingly soft, like a cold, white bed. It would be so easy to just close her eyes, to let the cold take her, to finally stop feeling the ache of being unwanted, of being discarded like trash. Her breathing grew shallow, each exhale a small, white ghost in the gregarious air. She thought of him, then. A fleeting memory, sharp and painful. Lee Jinwoo, her ex-husband. A man who was a storm of a different kind, all quiet intensity and devastating power. A man she had left to protect him from a world he never told her about, only to find herself in a gilded cage, far more dangerous. The irony was a bitter pill. She had run from a king, only to be devoured by his courtiers. Her eyelids felt heavy, so incredibly heavy. The roaring of the wind began to fade, replaced by a low, humming sound. A pair of intensely bright lights cut through the swirling snow, growing closer. A long, black car, silent as a shark, glided to a halt just feet from where she lay. The world was tilting, fading to black. She felt a profound sense of release. The fight was over. The back door of the car opened, spilling a sliver of warm, golden light onto the snow. A figure emerged, tall and broad, silhouetted against the storm. He moved with an unnerving grace, his expensive overcoat impervious to the blizzard's fury. He knelt beside her, and even through the fog of encroaching unconsciousness, she recognized the scent of sandalwood and subtle, clean steel. A hand, warm and strong, brushed the snow from her face. A voice, low and rough with a fury she hadn't heard in years, cut through the darkness. Amina. The voice was a fissure in the ice that had encased his heart for 2 years. Li Jinwu stared down at the woman half buried in the snow, and a cold, precise rage began to build within him. It was a controlled burn, far more dangerous than any flash of temper. It was the kind of rage that dismantled empires and salted the earth where they once stood. Her skin was pale, tinged with blue at the lips. The vibrant red of her shirt was a splash of blood against the stark white of the snow, a distress signal his soul recognized instantly. "Sir," his driver, Mr. Kong, asked, his voice calm but laced with concern from the open car door. Jinwu didn't turn. His entire universe had contracted to this small, fragile form at his feet. "Open my coat," he commanded, his voice dangerously quiet. Mr. Kong was by his side in an instant, holding the heavy cashmere coat open. With a gentleness that belied the violence simmering beneath his skin, Jinwu gathered Amina into his arms. She was terrifyingly light, as if the world had starved the very substance from her. He settled her against his chest, wrapping the coat around her, cocooning her in his warmth and the scent of his protection. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breath a faint, barely their whisper against his neck. He carried her to the car, the warmth of the heated leather interior a stark contrast to the frozen hell she had been lying in. He laid her carefully across the back seat, tucking the coat more securely around her. He slid in beside her, his hand resting on her forehead, feeling the deathly chill of her skin. "Mr. Kong," he said, his eyes never leaving her face. "Turn the car around. We're going to the penthouse. Have Dr. On meet us there in 20 minutes. Tell him it is a code black." Mr. Kong nodded, his expression grim. A code black meant life or death. It meant the boss's world was under threat. The heavy car executed a silent, perfect turn, its tires crunching on the fresh snow, and began to accelerate away from the manicured prison that had thrown her away. Jinwu looked out the window at the passing mansions, his reflection a mask of cold fury in the darkened glass. The Park family. He had allowed them to exist, to breathe, to maintain their pathetic illusion of status, all for her sake. Because she had asked for a clean break. But they had broken their end of the unspoken bargain. They had harmed what was his. And for that, there would be a reckoning. Not just a punishment. A complete and total erasure. Amina awoke to the soft crackle of a fire. For a moment, she was disoriented, her mind adrift in a sea of warmth and the scent of clean linen and something else, sandalwood. Her eyes fluttered open. She wasn't in the snow. She was in a vast, modern bedroom, swathed in a duvet so soft it felt like a cloud. A fire danced in a sleek, glass-fronted fireplace across the room. She was wearing a simple, incredibly soft gray t-shirt and matching sweatpants that were far too large for her, but felt like a hug. On the bedside table, a bowl of steaming rice porridge, Juk, sat waiting, its gentle aroma filling the air. Sitting in an armchair by the fire, watching her with an unnerving stillness, was Jinwu. He looked different than she remembered, yet exactly the same. The sharp lines of his face were harder, the quiet intensity in his dark eyes deeper. He wore a simple black sweater and trousers, but he filled the space with an aura of immense, contained power. He saw she was awake and rose, moving to the bed with that same silent, fluid grace. He didn't speak, just sat on the edge of the mattress, his presence a heavy, protective weight. He picked up the bowl of porridge. "You need to eat," he said. His voice was the same low rumble she remembered, the sound that had once been her anchor. She tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness washing over her. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, the warmth seeping through the soft cotton. Slowly, he held the spoon to her lips. It was a gesture of such simple, profound care that tears pricked her eyes. She hadn't been cared for in so long. She ate, spoonful by spoonful, the warm, savory porridge chasing the last of the cold from her bones. When the bowl was empty, he set it aside and simply looked at her. The doctor said you have mild hypothermia and are severely malnourished. But you will be fine, he paused, his gaze unwavering. They will not be. The words were spoken with a chilling lack of emotion, a simple statement of fact. Amina's breath hitched. Jinwoo, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted, his voice dropping into a register of absolute certainty. They put you out in a storm to die. They owe a debt for that. A debt I will collect in full, he reached out, his thumb gently brushing away a stray tear on her cheek. You are safe here, Amina. This is my home. No one will ever touch you again. Rest. Tomorrow, the correction begins. The next morning, the penthouse was a war room disguised as a luxury apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a breathtaking view of the snow-covered city below. But the beauty of the scene was lost on Jinwoo. He stood before a massive interactive screen, a digital tapestry of the Park family's life laid bare. Mr. Kong stood beside him, a tablet in hand, his expression impassive. Their primary assets are tied up in Park Consolidated, Mr. Kong reported, his voice crisp and professional. The company is leveraged against a series of loans from Daehan Capital. Jinwoo's lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It was not a pleasant sight. Daehan Capital. That's Lee Min-jun's territory. Remind him of the favor he owes me from the incident at the Incheon port. I want him to call their loans. All of them. Effective immediately, yes, sir. That will trigger a liquidity crisis. They won't be able to cover it. Exactly, Jinwoo pointed to a different section of the screen, a web of social connections. Mrs. Park. Her position as chairwoman of the Children's Heritage Foundation is her source of social currency. We have the files from 2 years ago, Mr. Kong said. The audit we conducted. The one you ordered us to seal. Unseal it, Jinwoo commanded. Leak the details of the charitable donations that were rerouted to fund her private art collection. Anonymously, of course. Send it to the top 3 investigative journalists in Seoul and to every member of the foundation's board. Mr. Kang's fingers flew across his tablet. Done, sir. The social fallout will be catastrophic. Good. Jinwoo's gaze was cold, his mind a razor-sharp instrument of vengeance. He was not just tearing down their house of cards. He was grinding the cards themselves into dust. He was stripping them of their money, their power, their reputation, the very things they valued more than human life, more than Amina's life. He felt a presence behind him and turned. Amina stood there, wrapped in a thick cashmere robe he had left for her. She looked small in the vast living space, but her eyes were clear, watching him with a complex mix of fear and something else, gratitude. Is this what you do? She asked, her voice soft. You press a button and people's lives are ruined. No, Jinwoo replied, his voice softening as he looked at her. I press a button and justice is delivered. There is a difference. They built their world on cruelty. I am simply showing them what it looks like from the rubble. The world of the Park family did not crumble. It evaporated. The montage of their downfall played out across Jinwoo's screens like a meticulously directed film. The first blow was financial. Mr. Park, in his gleaming corner office, received the call from Daehan Capital. The color drained from his face as he was informed his entire line of credit was being called in, due in 24 hours. His frantic calls to other banks were met with polite but firm rejections. Word had spread through the financial underworld with the speed of a virus. The Parks were poison. The second blow was social. Mrs. Park arrived at a lavish charity luncheon, dressed in couture, only to be met with icy stares. Whispers followed her like smoke. A board member approached, her face a mask of cold fury, and informed her she was to be investigated for embezzlement. Her phone buzzed with alerts from news outlets running the story. She was escorted from the premises, her public humiliation complete and absolute. While their universe imploded, Amina's was being rebuilt. Jinwoo did not crowd her. He gave her space, but his presence was a constant, reassuring warmth. He had the kitchen stocked with her favorite foods. He filled a bookshelf with novels by authors she loved. One evening, he came home with a single, perfect gardenia in a small pot. I remember you said they were your favorite, he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. He placed it on a table where the afternoon sun would catch it. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. It said, "I remember you. I see you." Amina found herself breathing easier. The hypervigilance that had been her constant companion for 2 years began to recede. She slept through the night without nightmares. She ate until she was full. She would watch the snow falling outside the vast windows, no longer seeing it as a threat, but as something beautiful, a clean slate. One night, she was watching an old movie when Jinwoo came to sit on the other end of the sprawling sofa. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the film's dialogue and the soft crackle of the fire. "Thank you," she whispered, not looking at him. "You didn't have to do any of this." He turned his head, his dark eyes studying her profile. "Yes, I did," he said simply. "There are certain things a man must do. Protecting what is his is one of them." The words hung in the air, filled with a possessive tenderness that made her heart ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. The status swap was complete. As her world was being filled with warmth and light, theirs was being plunged into a cold, permanent darkness. The city was a glittering tapestry of lights below the penthouse. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean and silent under a blanket of snow. Amina stood by the window, tracing the path of a distant car with her finger on the cold glass. Jinwoo came to stand beside her, a glass of warm tea in his hands, which he offered to her. She took it, their fingers brushing. The small spark of contact was electric, a jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "About your world." About all of this, he was silent for a long moment, his gaze lost in the city's constellations. "I wanted to keep you separate from it," he finally said, his voice laced with an old, familiar pain. "I wanted you to have a normal life. A safe one. My world, it isn't safe." He turned to face her, the soft light from the fireplace carving shadows onto his face. "My father was like me. He built this organization. But he made enemies. When I was a boy, they tried to use my mother to get to him. They failed, but she was hurt." He unconsciously touched a thin, silvery scar that ran from his temple into his hairline, almost hidden by his dark hair. "I got this trying to stop them." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She had seen that scar 1,000 times when they were married, but had never known its origin. He had always been so guarded about his past. "When we got married," he continued, his voice low and raw with vulnerability, "one of my rivals made a threat against you. A credible one. I thought the safest thing I could do for you was to let you go, to push you away so you would be out of the line of fire. I engineered the divorce. I made you think I didn't want you anymore. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it was the biggest mistake of my life." Tears welled in Amina's eyes. It all made sense now, his sudden coldness, the inexplicable distance that had grown between them. It wasn't a lack of love, it was a desperate, misguided act of protection. She reached up, her fingers tentatively tracing the line of the scar on his temple. His skin was warm. He closed his eyes at her touch, a shudder running through him. "I was so stupid," he murmured. "I thought I was protecting you, but I just delivered you to a different kind of monster. You found me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You came back for me." He opened his eyes, and they were dark, deep pools of regret and longing. "I never stopped looking for you, Amina. Not for a single day." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She leaned in, too, meeting him halfway. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then firming with a desperate, pent-up passion. The kiss was not one of simple romance. It was a kiss of reunion, of forgiveness, of two broken halves finally coming home. It was a promise made in the quiet of the night, a vow that they would never be separated by shadows again. The tender moment was shattered by a sudden, jarring sound, a low, electronic hum that vibrated through the floor, followed by the metallic slam of storm shutters descending over the panoramic windows, plunging the penthouse into an eerie, semi-darkness illuminated only by the fire and emergency lighting strips that activated along the baseboards. Red lights pulsed softly on a security panel near the door. Jinwoo broke the kiss instantly, his entire demeanor shifting from vulnerable lover to apex predator. He was on his feet, his body shielding Amina, his eyes scanning the darkness. What is it? Amina asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Perimeter breach, Jinwoo said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Someone is making a run at the building. He moved to an intercom panel. Mr. Kong. Status report. Mr. Kang's voice came back, impossibly calm through the speaker. Multiple hostiles, sir. They've bypassed the ground floor security. They're in the elevators, heading your way. My team is moving to intercept, but the penthouse is the target, the Kaipa Syndicate, Jinwoo snarled. They must have thought finding you had made me soft. Made me weak, he turned to Amina, his face grim but resolute. Stay behind me. This room is a fortress. The doors are reinforced steel. They cannot get in, but as he spoke, a heavy thud vibrated through the main door, followed by the high-pitched whine of a thermal lance. They were cutting through the lock. Amina's old fear, the instinct to freeze and be invisible, warred with a new, unfamiliar surge of defiance. She would not be a victim again. She would not hide while he fought for her. What can I do? She asked, her voice steady. Jinwoo looked at her, surprised. He saw not the frightened woman he had found in the snow, but a partner, her eyes clear and focused. He gave a sharp, appreciative nod. The security terminal, he said, pointing to the screen he had used to dismantle the parks. Bring up the building schematics. I need to see their approach vectors. Activate the fire suppression system in the main hallway. Not the water. The halon gas. It will slow them down, while Jinwoo retrieved a sleek, black handgun from a hidden compartment. Amina ran to the terminal. Her hands flew across the screen, her mind surprisingly clear. She found the schematics, highlighting the elevator shafts and service corridors. She found the environmental controls and activated the gas dispersal. On the screen, she could see the heat signatures of the intruders in the hall falter as the colorless, odorless gas filled the space. An alarm blared on her screen. They're cutting through the west wall, she yelled. It's a weaker point, a service chase. Jinwoo didn't hesitate. He moved to the wall, listening intently. They think I'm a fool, he murmured. The siege was not just an attack, it was a test. And as the whine of cutting tools grew louder, Amina knew, with absolute certainty, that they were testing the wrong man and the wrong woman. The whine of the plasma cutter reached a fever pitch before abruptly ceasing. A moment of tense silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then, a section of the reinforced wall glowed cherry red before being kicked inward with a deafening crash. Two figures, clad in black tactical gear and gas masks, spilled into the room, assault rifles raised. They never got a chance to fire. Two silenced shots echoed like sharp claps, and both intruders crumpled to the floor, neutralized by Jinwoo's precise, economical movements. He moved like a dancer of death, using the large sofa as cover. More figures tried to breach the opening. Amina, still at the terminal, saw another team approaching from the rooftop helipad. The roof, she shouted. They're coming down from the roof. Jinwoo glanced at the screen, then at her, a look of grim understanding passing between them. He gave a command into his wrist communicator. Mr. Kong, roof team is your priority. I have the breach. He tossed a small, heavy object to Amina. It was a panic button. If I fall, you press that. It will flood this entire floor with enough voltage to fry every circuit and every person in it. You will be safe in the panic room behind the bookshelf. His eyes held hers. I will not fall. He moved to face the breach, a shadow against the firelight, a guardian at the gate. The fight was brutal and swift. Jinwoo was not just a businessman. He was a warrior, trained and lethally efficient. But they were many. Gunfire erupted, chewing chunks out of the designer furniture and plaster walls. Through it all, Amina remained at her post, calling out enemy positions she saw on the schematic, a vital set of eyes he didn't know he needed. The battle ended when Mr. Kong and his team arrived, flanking the remaining intruders and subduing them with ruthless efficiency. The penthouse was a wreck of smoke, shattered glass, and fallen bodies. Jinwoo stood amidst the chaos, breathing heavily, a small cut bleeding on his cheek. He looked at Amina, who was still standing by the terminal, her knuckles white but her gaze steady. He crossed the room, ignoring the mess and his men, and pulled her into a fierce embrace. You were brave, he murmured into her hair. You were my partner. The next day, after the mess was cleared, Jinwoo arranged the final confrontation. Not in a boardroom, but in a cold, damp, and empty warehouse on the industrial waterfront. The Park family was brought before them. They looked diminished. Stripped of their fine clothes and arrogance, they were just a man and a woman, shivering in the cold. Their son was there too, flown back and finally facing the consequences of his willful neglect. They stared at Jinwoo with terror, but when their eyes fell on Amina, standing beside him, whole and strong, their terror was mingled with disbelief. "You have nothing left," Jinwoo stated, his voice echoing in the vast, empty space. "Your accounts are gone. Your company is being dismantled. Your name is synonymous with disgrace. The authorities have a very thick file on your financial crimes. You will go to prison for a very long time." Mrs. Park finally broke. "Please," she begged, the words scraping from her throat. "We'll do anything." Jinwoo looked at Amina. "It is not my decision to make. The debt is owed to her." All three of them turned to look at Amina, their faces a pathetic mask of desperation. She was no longer the invisible girl they had thrown out. She was the arbiter of their fate. She looked at their terrified faces, seeing not the monsters they were, but the hollow, pathetic shells they had become. "Prison is too easy," Amina said, her voice clear and steady, carrying a weight they could not have imagined. "You will be given new identities, a small, monthly stipend. Enough to live on, but not enough to be comfortable. You will be relocated to a small town where no one knows you. You will live the rest of your lives in obscurity. You will know what it is like to be nothing. To be invisible, it was not vengeance. It was a correction. A life sentence of the very emptiness they had tried to inflict upon her. The penthouse was restored to its former pristine state, the scars of the battle erased, as if they had never been. The only change was the small pot with the gardenia, which now sat on the central coffee table, its white petals a symbol of a new beginning. Amina and Jinwoo stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights below them a sea of diamonds. The war was over. Both of them. The one waged with money and whispers against the Parks, and the one waged with bullets against the Kaipa Syndicate. A profound peace settled in the room. "Is it really over?" Amina asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. His arm was wrapped securely around her waist, a familiar and welcome weight. "With them, yes," he confirmed. "They are ghosts now. The Kaipa will regroup, but they know what this place is now. They know who we are now. They will not be so bold again." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. His dark eyes, once so full of shadows and secrets, were now clear, filled only with an intense, unwavering adoration for her. "I almost lost you twice, Amina," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Once through my own foolish pride, and once to my enemies. It will not happen a third time. I will not let you go again." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her voice soft but firm. She was no longer the woman who had run from his world. She had faced it, and in doing so, had found her own strength. She was not just a survivor. She was a queen who had finally found her throne, right beside him. He kissed her then, a deep, soul-searing kiss filled with promises of a shared future. It was a kiss that spoke of quiet mornings, of shared laughter, of facing down whatever storms the world might throw at them, together. The warmth they generated was more than a match for any cold. It was a fortress, a sanctuary, a home. The world had tried to break her, had thrown her into the merciless cold, but it had failed. It had only led her back to the one man whose fire was always meant to be her shelter. The debt was paid, the ledger was closed, and in the heart of the glittering city, in a tower of glass and steel, a new life, forged in ice and tempered by fire, was just beginning. They had found each other again, not as they were, but as they were meant to be, equals, partners, and the undisputed rulers of their own small, fiercely protected world.